Frank Donovan, 73, arrived at Camp Pendleton every morning before sunrise. A janitor, invisible. Young Marine recruits mocked him, shoved him aside, treated him like furniture. One cocky recruit knocked over his bucket and laughed. Frank said nothing, just kept working. But in his locker sat a locked box. Dog tags, a green beret, a Vietnam War photograph. Then a legendary SEAL commander arrived for inspection, locked eyes with Frank across the training yard, and went pale. What he revealed next left the entire base in tears. Before we dive in, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? The morning sun beat down on Camp Pendleton's obstacle course, where 20 Marine recruits pushed through their drills with the aggression of young men desperate to prove themselves. Sweat poured, muscles burned. Then Tyler noticed him, an old man in faded fatigues, decades out of regulation, emerging from the maintenance shed with a mop bucket and cleaning supplies. He moved slowly toward the barracks behind them, head down, shoulders bent under the weight of age and a life the recruits knew nothing about. "Hey!" Tyler's voice cracked across the training field like a whip. "Grandpa, you lost!" The entire platoon stopped. 20 pairs of eyes turned. "Since when do we let civilians wander around a military base?" Tyler continued, louder now, feeding off the attention. "What are you, the janitor?" Nervous laughter spread through the ranks. The old man, Frank, didn't respond, didn't even look up. Just kept walking with quiet dignity, his weathered hands gripping that bucket like it held something more precious than soapy water. Tyler stepped directly into his path. "I'm talking to you, old man." Frank tried to move around him. Tyler shoved past hard, shoulder to shoulder. The bucket hit the ground, water flooding the dirt. He walked away laughing, his buddies trailing behind like wolves. Frank stood alone, staring at the mess, saying absolutely nothing. Frank stood there for a long moment, staring at the spilled water soaking into the dirt. Then he bent down, slowly, carefully, and picked up the bucket. His knees protested. They always did. 73 years old, and his body remembered every mission, every jump, every night spent in places that didn't exist on any map. He arrived at Camp Pendleton every morning at 0500, before the sun kissed the Pacific horizon. Maintenance worker, invisible. He moved through the base like a ghost, wiping down barracks windows until they gleamed, tightening loose hinges on footlockers, replacing burnt-out bulbs in hallways where young Marines would never notice the darkness had been there at all. His hands worked with the precision of a man who'd spent a lifetime making things right, but his body moved with stiffness, a hitch in his left knee, shoulders that didn't quite straighten, old injuries that whispered of a past no one asked about. Personnel streamed past him in the corridors, officers, NCOs, recruits, eyes forward, minds elsewhere. He was furniture. The man who made sure their world functioned while remaining unseen. In his small locker in the maintenance office, Frank kept a wooden box. Some mornings when the silence pressed too heavy, he'd open it. Inside, a black and white photograph, edges worn from decades of handling. 5 men in Vietnam-era fatigues, faces smeared with camouflage paint, eyes hard with something the camera couldn't capture. His hands trembled as he traced those faces. Then he closed it quickly, locked it away. Lunch came. Frank sat alone in the mess hall corner, watching the recruits at their tables. They joked, shoved each other, bonded like he once had. His eyes held sadness, but also pride. He saw himself in every one of them. A drill instructor passed, caught Frank's eye, and nodded respectfully. But he didn't stop. No one ever stopped. Section 3. The escalation. Humiliation. Amplified. Days passed. Tyler's arrogance didn't fade. It metastasized, spreading through his crew like infection through a wound. Thursday morning brought a briefing on military history. The recruits sat in rows while a staff sergeant spoke about legacy, sacrifice, the generations who wore the uniform before them. Vietnam veterans, the sergeant said, his voice carrying weight, served in impossible conditions. Many never received the welcome home they deserved. From the back row, Tyler's voice cut through. Yeah, well, those guys didn't even win their war. Laughter rippled, sharp, ugly, uncertain. Frank was wiping down windows 20 feet away. His hand stopped mid-motion. His jaw tightened like a vice. But he didn't turn around, didn't say a word, just kept cleaning, each stroke of the rag slower than the last. The briefing ended. Frank gathered his supplies and headed toward the equipment shed. That's when Tyler and 3 others blocked his path during their PT cool-down. Frank carried a toolbox in one hand, a stepladder in the other. He tried to walk around them. Tyler sidestepped, still blocking. Careful, old man. Wouldn't want you to break a hip out here. His buddies snickered, but the sound was hollow. Frank adjusted his grip on the ladder and tried again. Tyler moved with him, a smirk plastered across his young face. Seriously, what did you even do with your life? Push a mop for 50 years? The other recruits shifted uncomfortably. A few looked away. No one intervened. Frank stopped, set down the ladder, looked Tyler square in the eyes, calm, steady, unshaken. I did my job, son, just like you're learning to do yours. Tyler scoffed, louder now, playing to his audience. Yeah, well, some jobs matter more than others. He walked away. His crew followed. Frank stood there alone, tools in hand, surrounded by nothing but silence and the distant sound of the ocean wind. That evening, he sat on a bench outside the barracks, staring at the waves crashing against the shore. The sky bled orange and purple. Footsteps approached. The base chaplain, a kind man with gray at his temples, sat down beside him. You okay, Frank? Frank nodded slowly. They're just kids. They don't know. But his eyes were wet, catching the last light of the day. The chaplain's words stayed with Frank that night. But morning came the way it always did. Early, quiet, demanding. Friday brought news that rippled through Camp Pendleton like electricity. A high-level inspection was coming. Commander James Garrett, Navy SEAL, living legend, would be visiting to evaluate training protocols. The recruits buzzed with nervous energy. They'd all heard the stories. Garrett had survived missions that shouldn't have been survivable. Hostage rescues in Mogadishu, black ops in the Hindu Kush. The Navy Cross hung on his chest, and beneath it a dozen other ribbons that spoke of blood and fire and impossible choices. Tyler and his crew stood a little straighter that week. Even arrogance bows to legends. Frank continued his work, replacing air filters, mopping floors, tightening bolts on weight racks. But something shifted in the atmosphere around him. Tuesday afternoon, Major Collins, a squared-away officer with 20 years under his belt, spotted Frank in the hallway outside the admin building. He stopped, turned, and walked directly toward him, extended his hand. Frank. The handshake was firm, deliberate. It's good to see you. I heard the commander is coming this week. Collins paused, his eyes searching Frank's weathered face. Does he know you're here? Frank smiled faintly. the kind of smile that held ghosts. "Don't think so, sir." Collins nodded slowly, something unspoken passing between them. "He should." Then he walked away, leaving Frank standing there with his mop bucket and a past that refused to stay buried. Later that day, Frank was cleaning the administrative building's main corridor when he passed the memorial wall. Polished brass plaques, photographs behind glass, fallen heroes, Medal of Honor recipients, decorated warriors whose names would never be forgotten. He slowed, then stopped. His eyes found a specific section: Vietnam reconnaissance teams. His finger rose, hovering over a name etched in metal, then pulled away as if the touch might burn. A young corporal passing by noticed. Curiosity got the better of him. "You know someone up there, sir?" Frank nodded, his voice barely audible. "A few." The corporal lingered a moment, unsure what to say, then walked away. That night, alone in the maintenance office, Frank opened the wooden box he kept locked in his locker. Inside, tarnished dog tags on a beaded chain, a faded green beret, the fabric thin from age, and the photograph: 5 men in jungle fatigues, faces smeared with camouflage paint and mud, eyes that had seen hell and walked back out. Frank's face was among them, young, hard, alive. Section 5. The Turning Point. The commander's arrival, Thursday. Morning arrived with California sunshine, and the weight of expectation pressing down on every recruit at Camp Pendleton. The black SUV rolled through the main gate at 0900 sharp. Commander James Garrett emerged, mid-50s, broad-shouldered, his dress uniform immaculate and covered in ribbons that told stories most men couldn't imagine. Navy Cross, Silver Star, Purple Heart with 3 clusters. Behind him, aides moved like shadows. The recruit stood at attention in formation. Perfect lines. Perfect posture. Tyler among them, chest puffed, chin high, playing the part he thought mattered. Garrett inspected the ranks, his face carved from stone. Professional. Stern. A man who'd earned the right to judge. The base commander led him on a tour. Obstacle courses where sweat still stained the dirt. Shooting ranges that smelled of gunpowder and oil. Briefing rooms where the future was being forged one lesson at a time. Then they walked past the maintenance shed. Garrett stopped, abruptly, completely. Like he'd hit an invisible wall. 50 feet away, Frank stood at the base of a flagpole, replacing a frayed rope with steady, practiced hands. His back was turned. He was alone, doing the work no one noticed. Garrett's face shifted. Shock first, eyes widening, mouth opening slightly. Then something deeper. Something that looked like a man seeing a ghost he'd mourned for decades. He started walking. Away from the entourage. Away from protocol. Straight toward Frank. The base commander looked confused. "Sir?" Garrett didn't answer. Didn't even hear him. He stopped 10 feet away, his voice breaking the morning silence. "Frank," one word. Cracked down the middle with disbelief. Frank turned slowly. The rope slipped from his hands. Recognition flashed in his eyes, immediate, undeniable. His shoulders pulled back. His spine straightened. For just a moment, the ghost of the soldier he'd been 50 years ago flickered across his weathered frame. "Commander," he said quietly. Garrett closed the distance in 3 strides, threw protocol into the wind, and pulled Frank into a crushing embrace. The kind of hug that speaks when words have no power left. The recruits watched, frozen, confused, stunned. Tyler's smirk evaporated. Garrett stepped back, his eyes wet, his voice trembling. "I thought you were dead. After the valley, after the extraction, no one could find you. We searched for weeks." Frank shook his head slowly. "I made it out, just took a different path." Garrett turned toward the assembled crowd, officers, recruits, staff, and his voice transformed. Loud, commanding, every inch the decorated warrior he was. This man, he pointed at Frank, is Master Sergeant Frank Donovan, Green Beret, 3 tours in Vietnam. He led the recon team that saved my life, and 23 others in the A Shau Valley in 1971. His voice cracked but didn't break. He was captured, tortured, and he still got us out. He was recommended for the Medal of Honor. Silence fell like a hammer. Tyler's face drained of every ounce of color. Garrett wasn't finished. He is one of the bravest men I have ever known. And if any of you disrespected him, if any of you mocked him, dismissed him, treated him like he was invisible, then you disrespected every value this uniform stands for. The words hung in the air like judgment itself. After the revelation, Garrett insisted Frank join him in the base commander's office. Private, no audience. Just 2 men who'd bled together a lifetime ago. The recruits dispersed slowly, whispering, processing what they'd just witnessed. Tyler stood frozen in formation long after the others had broken ranks. Shame carved so deep into his face it looked like physical pain. 2 hours later, Frank emerged from the building and headed toward the mess hall. The sun was setting, painting the base in shades of amber and regret. Tyler was waiting outside, trembling. When Frank approached, the young recruit stepped forward, his voice barely holding together. "Sir, I didn't know. I'm sorry. I was an asshole." Frank raised a hand, gently cutting him off. "You didn't know because I didn't tell you. And that's okay." Tyler shook his head violently, tears forming in his eyes. "It's not okay. I insulted you. I disrespected everything you did. Everything you sacrificed." Frank looked at him steadily, not with anger, but with something softer. Understanding. "You're young. You're learning. I was cocky once too, believe it or not." A faint smile crossed his weathered face. "The uniform doesn't make you a hero, son. What you do when no one's watching, that's what matters." Tyler nodded, unable to speak through the tightness in his throat. Frank placed a hand on his shoulder, firm and fatherly. "You want to honor me. Be better tomorrow than you were today. That's all any of us can do." Tyler straightened, raised his hand in a salute. It wasn't perfect. His fingers shook, his form was off. But it was earnest, real. Frank returned it with the precision of a man who'd saluted 1,000 fallen brothers. The next morning, the base held a small ceremony near the flagpole where everything had changed. Frank stood in front of the assembled personnel as Garrett presented him with a shadow box, his faded green beret mounted on velvet, his medals arranged in perfect rows, and the photograph of his team centered beneath glass. Garrett spoke again, honoring Frank publicly, his voice carrying across the field. The recruits stood at attention, eyes forward, but many were crying, silent tears that spoke louder than words. Frank didn't say much. He thanked them quietly, his voice steady but soft. Then he asked only one thing: "Remember my brothers who didn't come home." Section 7. The Moral and Call to Action. That evening, Frank walked alone along the base perimeter as the sun melted into the Pacific. The American flag rippled behind him, snapping in the wind with a sound like distant thunder. Heroes don't always wear their medals. Sometimes they wear work boots and carry mop buckets. Sometimes they sweep floors in the same places they once bled to protect. Respect isn't earned by what you wear. It's owed to those who served when you weren't even born. Every person you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Every wrinkled face holds a story written in scars and silence. Every quiet soul may have once roared in places the world will never know existed. Don't wait for a commander to arrive to show respect. Do it now. Do it always. In the maintenance office, Frank's locker stood open. Inside, the wooden box rested on the shelf, dog tags catching the last light of day, glinting like promises kept. The photograph of 5 men stared out into the empty room, their eyes still hard, still watching, still remembering what the living often forget. The flag above Camp Pendleton lowered slowly in evening colors. Somewhere, a bugler played taps, and Frank Donovan walked into the sunset carrying his history quietly, the way he always had. This story is a tribute to all who serve in silence. If it moved you, honor a veteran today. Share this story. Remember their names.